This podcast is sponsored by CDO Group, the industry leader in providing a full range of construction and project management services. CDO Group has managed thousands of projects in all 50 states. Their group of experts provides systems, processes, and procedures to make sure that your projects turn over on time and on budget every single time. With over 24 years of experience, CDO Group is the industry's leader in construction management and general contracting services. To find them, go to cdogroup.com. Hi, and welcome to the Future of Development podcast. My name's Anthony Amunategui, and I'm here to inspire people to find amazing careers in the construction development world. If you like our podcast, please make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. If you really like our podcast, make sure you hit the little bell. Hi, and welcome to the Future of Development podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Amunategui, and today we're going to have some mind-blowing conversations with Steffen Waite. He's currently the founder and CEO of Simple 5D. Steffen's career has 30 years of construction management. He actually is aware of the driving forces behind what it takes to do a successful project. People, processes, and performance. He gets what clients want, time, money, and quality. He understands technology. He takes BIM technology, his manufacturing career. He's taken both of them, put them together. He's found ways to really reduce costs, create friction-free projects, and really make it so that our industry does change. It's not just a bunch of fish in a fishbowl. He holds multiple degrees from multiple colleges. I'm excited to have him on the show. Everybody, let's have a big warm welcome for Steffen Waite. Steffen, welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on today. As always, our conversations really do get robust. There's lots of thoughts. Audience members, stick around for this one because I promise you with Steffen, we will go down some paths that will really spur on some thought for you today. So I'm excited. But before we get started, Steffen, I'd like you to just do a little bit about your background, just so the audience gets to know you, kind of where you live, and just get to kind of plant us here in the conversation a little bit.
Sure, Anthony, and thank you for having me on the show. It's a real pleasure to be here. So my name is Steffen Waite. I'm the CEO for Simple 5D Systems Incorporated. The company is based out of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And the core of the company, its focus is really on harnessing technology for the construction industry for solving problems before they actually happen on the site. So our goal is a combination of both software and services. Essentially, what we're trying to do is build digital twins of projects before they actually get realized in reality. And from there, we can drive reporting and visibility and transparency on the project so that people can make better decisions and plan better in advance of actually showing up on site. I found in my career, my background is civil engineering. I graduated from the University of Toronto. Most of the 90s, I graduated in 1990, and most of my 90s were spent in the management of construction projects, lots of high-profile projects. I spent most of my time in the 90s in Europe in all various complications of projects from multi-residential to bridges, tunnels, and electronic accelerators. And when I came back to North America, interestingly enough, I felt I had actually missed the dot-com explosion. I got back to Vancouver in November of 1998. And this internet thing, which was still visible in Europe at the time, but certainly not as prevalent. Ironically, the Europeans were behind in the way of adoption of the internet and sort of explosion of the economic uses of the internet. And then I got into, I wanted to have part of that. I got into internet payment systems. And then we started a project where we invented a keyboard for Palm Pilots, so a folding keyboard. We did all the industrial design here and microelectronics design in Vancouver. I was the technical lead on that whole project. Manufacturing something like that in North America is at a high cost. So we ended up traveling Japan and Taiwan and focused on a tier 2 keyboard manufacturer in Taiwan, who introduced us then to mass manufacturing in China. It was a wild ride, probably one of the best experiences of my life. So I was bringing the construction industry from physical buildings and swinging hammers to then assembling parts for a keyboard, which then morphed into making money, going back to the construction industry. And then, but I had sniffed the essence of what it would be to be a business owner. And so after my children had grown to, the youngest one was probably 2 years old, so stable and taken care of at home, I started another business where I got into manufacturing of cladding systems for the construction industry. I would say that's where the most challenging events happened in my life. The keyboard was probably the most passionate, the most like a lot of joy coming out of that, because it was high tech meets construction engineer. And then the cladding was more applying advanced cutting technologies and manufacturing technologies, but then how do you meet that with the two-dimensional world, right? The construction was typically a two-dimensional PDF. That's the drawing, that's the medium of communication that you would find in the construction industry. And I found that the biggest problem was actually the design of the buildings and what they would call the coordinated design of a building. And then you're cutting things to a tolerance of a 16th of an inch, trying to make a silk purse basically out of a sow's ear. And that's how I moved into three-dimensional technologies, because I felt that the essence of making money in manufacturing was to be able to have the data points necessary to be able to go from a digital object to a physical product on a truck delivered to a construction site and then installed. So that was sort of the birthplace of Simple 5D after I sold the company called Red Leaf. I'm not a person that sits around and stares at my navel for too long. So 2 to 3 months after I had sold Red Leaf, I began Simple 5D. So that was at the end of 2019. And a year and a half later, here we are.
Talking about with, creative folks, that the more we're allowed to, the more the space that we create that allows for that creativity to explore itself. And as ideas come, certainly BIM technology, that thought, has really changed the construction industry. The spatial analysis, the way that we look at things, the way that 3D modeling comes into play. And I think you're right on with, construction materials, being delivered to a job site that are already cut to fit within an 1/8 of an inch or even 1/16 of an inch tolerances. So that the labor shortage that we're experiencing today gets lessened by, the stuff that we can do in a factory, by machinery or by robotics. And you're seeing that happen throughout our industry. It sounds like you guys really were on the cutting edge of that revolution with siding materials that could do that.
There's no disputing that BIM is here to stay, and it is a significant part of what we're doing, at least conceptually. But I would also argue that there's still a resistance to this change in the construction industry. As much as you and I, as business owners, would like to see this happen, because actually BIM and 3D and databases provide us more control, more insight, more key performance indicators, more dashboarding, more transparency of what's going on. As a business owner, one of your greatest fears is trying to understand, what are people doing? The more people that you have, well, what are they up to? You have less and less time in the day to actually put thought to any action. The decisions you need to make, they need to be effective. And generally, you hope that they're the right ones. And so data is really the key to fuel the ability to make decisions. But you'll find that in practice, I still see a lot of resistance to adopting 3D technologies, because it's a different mindset. The average engineer, site manager who's gone to college for a 2 or 4 year degree, who's maybe spent some time as a superintendent, who these days, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot of vocational skills. Like your average project manager does not know how to swing a hammer. It's horrifying to think, but it is true.
A lot of them are not even construction savvy, right? They're just understanding schedules and communication, and that gap has to get bridged somewhere, right? As AI technologies come into play, we were working with a group a couple weeks ago where you're wearing these VR glasses as you walk through high-rise buildings, being able to see specifications and locations and materials, and it will identify them. That AI technology, so you can see that really bridging the gap right now, where you've got a site manager who's not really the construction expert, but more of a process expert, understanding the people and how the people are affecting the process and making those adaptations for the schedules that come out, those efficiencies continue to change as the business itself, I believe right now is on this verge of very similar to AI. AI takes an idea and splits it up into multiple ideas and it is in a multiple function as it works on multiple different facets of it, and brings it together in a much quicker fashion. Well, I believe our industry is going through that right now. You've got across every group I talk to. I mean, there is not a group that I spend time with that is not working on speed to market and working on smarter ideas, energy efficiencies across all of the boards. Now, they all may be siloed, right? To your point, they're all maybe little tiny silos, and not everybody gets them, but they're working on it, right? Over here, they've got a software tool that works on site on dirt. With a group a few weeks ago that they created an app that takes dirt off of one site and brings it to another site. Right? Like literally, just like the Uber of dirt, right? So you're taking, instead of it going from your site to a landfill back to a site, it goes from site to site. You need 15 truckloads of dirt, great. I need to get rid of 15 truckloads of dirt, great. And now we marry the two, and one goes from the other one. It makes it a lot more efficient, energy efficient, cost efficient. So that's one tool that's getting worked on right now. That group is hard at work over there. You got another group working on the VR glasses. You got another group that are working on different platforms for 3D modeling. And my belief is, as those little technologies are being worked out separately, they'll start to absorb each other and converge, right? And as they converge, we'll start to see simplification of the process and better adoption rates. Because right now, you're right. I mean, you watch individuals that have been doing it one way. The biggest problem with change is the adoption rate of a new idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing all kinds of challenges. Well, interesting challenges. Like, it's exciting, right? Maybe challenge is not the right word, but what I see as some of the difficulties, the integration, it's finding the people that actually understand all aspects to be able to integrate those. One thing that I find really cool that you didn't mention too is like a layout robot, like the Dusty robot, can go onto a concrete slab and can draw out the lines for the steel stud. Like, how brilliant is that? How much head scratching has gone on in the last century for layout, dropping plumb bobs from the ceiling, which was always when I grew up in the industry as being a kid, you're like, why are we starting from the ceiling going down? Well, that's because we need to have a plumb wall, right? But in essence, the riser comes from the floor up. So it's using all these technologies to integrate to make us better. At the same time, that's gonna probably mean that there's a consolidation in the amount of decision makers that you would typically see on a project, which is probably good because that's where also some of the disputes happen. And it empowers the guy that actually is really the essence of a construction site, which is the superintendent, right? So the superintendent is a vocational person that has grown up as a carpenter, possibly went to university studying engineering, but has a very good technical insight and is very highly motivated for technical achievements within a construction site. So,
but even that point, I think he's the guy on the job site that can paint the picture, right? He's the person on that job site that says, this is why we're doing it. Everybody else shows up to do the job, where I do it, how I do it, what part do I start on first. Someone's got to make the call. And to date, you've got a superintendent who can go out there and paint that picture. Now, some do it better than others, right? Some do it before you get there. They paint the picture. So Bob and Betty and Bruce show up with the right tools and the right equipment. Some do it when you get there, and they kind of help you work it out the day you get there. The really great ones are the ones that say, hey, Bob and Betty, you guys, you don't need to bring your entire truckload of stuff. I need these 5 things. Today, you're going to work on this wall. You need a pipe bender, 5 electrical outlets, and this much electrical wiring. And please bring that to my job site. Be there at 7 a.m. and I'll have you a wall exposed, ready to go from 7:35 till 9:45. You guys will do your work. As the the superintendent is able to see that site picture better. Those are the ones that have always been successful. But I call them cowboys. You're out there, and every once in a while you get a hold of a good cowboy, and they're out there gunfighting for you. But great. And as soon as you try to replicate that gunfighter, it's not that's where the business gets plagued. I spend a lot of time trying to replicate that individual, that gunfighter, and the situations change. The gunfighter gets shot. I lose that gunfighter, and the rest of the system becomes invaluable.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy. I've never even looked at it that way. What a metaphor. The gunfighter gets shot. I lose my business, or at least on that project, my business starts to unravel. And so interesting enough, the planning is key. Maximizing people's productivity. And let's say, I guess, as we move into AI and machinery and intelligent machinery and Internet of Things, we're moving into the efficient use of equipment on job sites. So the scheduling is very, very important. So what I love about not just the 3D BIM, it's using BIM also for scheduling, which you call 4D. So you're mapping Gantt charts and the schedule logic together with the BIM model. And what a fantastic tool for superintendents or project managers, and also other business owners like the subcontractors, to be able to visualize and to be able to communicate to their team about where we need to be on a given day in a given week of a given year. So I think that companies like Bentley Systems 4D Synchro Pro is a huge tool that's going to see a lot of uptake. I mean, it's an expensive piece of software, but it's actually not that expensive when you take a look at what you can do with it. And then they have these 3 different tiers of licensing. But to have that, you talked about VR. Well, with Synchro, you can have your Gantt chart up top, and you can have your 3D model right there in front of you. You can rotate. You can basically drag with your mouse where you want to be. Let's say in November of 2021, where does the project have to be? That's the milestones we need to hit. And then you can basically, it's like pull scheduling. You can essentially then determine where you need to be tomorrow in order to hit that date in November 2021. What do we need to have on site? And then tie that to material quantities, tie that to dollars, right? Like the finance of a project. It's amazing then the clarity that BIM actually provides. Like the BIM is really the core of the data, because that's what it is. BIM is building information modeling, but it's really a database, right? And it just has some graphic interface attached to that. Now it's complicated to set up. There's no question. People need specialized training.
Most people get to break that barrier, because you're right. Right now, BIM is a barrier that's tough to break. I mean, there's the BIM technology, but then overlaying that into the architectural models, overlaying that into the product model availability, overlaying that into, it's great. I can measure the space, but now I need to be able to get the space to be able to fit this table, be able to fit this laptop, be able to fit that window behind me. Getting those parts and pieces, becomes that next phase. So getting the measurements are great. Now be able to get the measurements and getting those adapted to that space. Here's where the speed changes, right? If we're able to, in design development, pick from available resources that'll be in a timely fashion to meet the project schedule and pricing, that's where the ultimate goal is, right? I mean, if you're able to take most frustrating part of our business is this: you design it, I got to go price it, it's never right. Then I get to take your design. We work with a brand that sells lots of coffee that has a siren on the front of their emblem. I don't know what that brand is, but we'll talk about that later. And they have these amazing designers. I mean, they make the most beautiful coffee shops in the world. And I will tell you that 80% of the projects that we do, their design never gets fully executed because they designed it in a vacuum. Months later, by the time it goes through design, permitting, budget approval, final budget approval, final budget operational approval, all the stuff that's go through from design to the time we start construction, product availability, all the stuff changes. And now I take someone's amazing design, a creator's design, whoever that creative person was, and now we take that design and we have to bastardize it. Well, look, we can't get that tile. I know that tile is a tile you really wanted for the backsplash, but now I got to get this tile. It's closed, but it's not. And the designers look at you like, man, that was the backbone of my design. right? Oh, I can't get that chair. Well, we can get you this chair. And maybe not, it works, but ultimately, I always feel like, isn't that a shame? We get these creative folks that do this great work. They're artists. Those creative folks are artists in their creations. And I'm stuck on the other side, either because of budget, availability, specifications, it doesn't match the area, flame spread, or some weird technical problem that would have been great to know that when they were designing.
You've hit on an interesting piece. Well, first of all, art is not worth anything unless we can make money with it. Well, sorry, I take that back. There's beautiful art in this world that's worth a lot of money, but if we're talking about a business, so artists to create a design for a building for the essence of commerce, you can have the best looking building in the world. If it doesn't function and work, it's not going to support commerce. And there's probably in every major metropolitan area examples of really good looking buildings that actually aren't that functional. And interestingly enough, Frank Lloyd Wright had a flair for design that's not very functional. Right?
No, every roof you ever built leaks. You know, I'm in Frank Lloyd Wright town here in Oak Park, Illinois, and every single house that he's done leaks somewhere. And it's kind of funny how he had great design, but function and some of the technical stuff wasn't quite as efficient.
Yeah, so I think that this tie and this opportunity that also exists is the actual interrelatedness of products, performance specifications, the easy access to it. So like you go to a company like Amazon, you look up a product and you get a moderate amount of information around the performance specifications, or at least the specifications of a product. And you don't really have that yet in the building industry. It's coming, for sure it's coming. And that was one of the essences of why we created Simple5 D2, because you brought up before pricing and budget. Again, this wonderful design, this wonderful piece of art that you guys have come up, what's the cost? Well, sorry, sir, I don't know. That's up for the cost engineer or the quantity surveyor to figure out. Well, I don't want to talk to the quantity surveyor. I want to talk to the designer. You guys should have a sense of what the cost is, because if it doesn't make budgetary sense, it's not going to happen. So you just wasted 3 months of design. What's the cost? I'm sorry, I don't know.
And so then what happens is that we get stuck using the same materials. Well, here's my underground structure system. All right, great. I get stuck using that same, and I'm looking at it, going, great. That was great on project in Florida, but now we're in Alabama and those products are available, but they keep speccing those products in. Now my cost of transfer. And by the way, we could do a much different system. On this site, we have plenty of site available. We can put ponds in, all kinds of other availabilities that happen on site work, but the architectural and engineering team get locked into one way of thinking. And that one way of thinking ends up taking our customer spending lots and lots of money where it may or may not be needed, and ultimately affects the long-term viability of the organization that's building the product, building what they're building. And now we're stuck telling the customer, hey, your project's not viable because your budget's out of whack.
You touched on an interesting sore spot, I guess maybe, or let's say a place that hasn't really evolved yet from a technology perspective, and that's the customer of the design services. So ultimately, developer of the building. So whether that's an ongoing business, right, that wants a warehouse or a manufacturing facility, or Starbucks wants a coffee shop, or Chick-fil-A wants a drive-through, there's huge gaps in the building development industry. There's not a lot of Steve Jobs of the building and development industry, ones that are passionately focused on every piece and the follow through and the thread of the actual finished product and how that's going to contribute to mankind in the way of the design and the functionality of the building. I find that let's take multi-residential for instance, because obviously I have to sell the services of my company too. And I find that there is an unwillingness to really go through all the aspects of construction and project realization. It's like, well, we're a developer. We buy the land and then we market the finished product. What happens in between? As long as it as long as we make the profit in the end that we targeted from the beginning, we don't really care. And I say to them, but you could save $3-4 million on a $100 million development. Yeah, we have our processes, and as long as we make our lift of $10 to $15 million on a $100 million job site, we're not really too bothered. We'll let the general contractor deal with that. And well, what if the building doesn't work? Like, what if it could work better? What if you could make money on the building after it's actually being realized? Like, what if you can, like, let's take dishwashers, for instance, right? So let's say multi-residential, you've got a 150 unit high-rise building, 40 stories tall, right? So what's the life expectancy these days of a dishwasher?
Let's say 10 years.
Well, I would say that's actually, you'd be I would say 7 is probably
let's say 7.
Yeah. Right. And I say, like, I have friends that say, oh, I have a repairman coming by. So don't even let the repairman come into the house. Just throw that dishwasher out and replace your dishwasher. Well, why isn't the building developer making money on a lift on every piece of product that's getting replaced within a building? It's like the warranty of a building, and insurance companies too, right? I mean, water leakage. So why shouldn't now we have a whole system throughout the life cycle of the building where actually somebody who actually originated the building is making money from that? And then what about you have a store? You can actually have a store in each building that the developer can make money on. But it's so much data, so much. You really need passion to put it all together. Artificial intelligence, data management, and people just lose momentum and energy.
Every one of us entrepreneurs, the ideas won't stop coming. The amount of energy it takes to go execute on that idea, that's always the hard part, right? I mean, look, you can look at a building and go, look, there's all these opportunities. Now, the first thing I think about at my age now is I don't have the energy to go do half of them. Right. I've done my share of startup companies. I've done my 80-hour weeks. I still do 80-hour weeks. I don't know how long I want to sustain that for. So the thought of getting better data faster, so I can start to pick and choose how I can do that and mitigate some of the startup time and exposure, cost and exposure. Being able to mitigate some of that. Going, all right, look, if I want to do a dishwasher repair system in this building. Great. Here, I'm going to have a facility man or facility woman who can do dishwashers, ironing boards, and fix all the track lights in the building. Right? We'll have that. Now, what does it take for me to put that crew together? What's my projected income going to be for the team? How will all that play out? Anything I can do to find better data so I can mitigate some of that exposure. Makes the likelihood of that happening a little bit faster. Now, I say the other side of that becomes true. What about understanding, in big technology, as we look at the buildings themselves and figuring out why not have a dishwasher that lasts forever, right? What's the part that breaks down in this dishwasher every single time? I'm looking at Tesla nowadays, and they're saying, hey, these cars can go 1 million miles, right? We're building these to be a 1 million mile vehicle. I mean, Ford wasn't thinking that way.
Well, I'm sure that Elon Musk would tell you, yeah, the car can go 1 million miles, right? The motors and the axles can turn 1 million miles, and the frame, the body can stay together for the 1 million miles. But the one thing that's going to have to keep getting replaced is, 1 is the battery, and 2, the CPU, right? Because we keep advancing what we're doing. I mean, that's one of the beauties of Teslas is that they do software updates while you sleep. And they can actually influence the performance of the vehicles while you sleep. But at what point, just like your iPhone, at what point does that CPU become outdated and has to be changed? So what's the failure of most dishwashers? It's the CPU. PCB board is kind of what they call it, right? The circuit board that holds all the circuitry together. That's typically what fails. So if you could actually, just like you have a toner cartridge in your printer, if you could just basically pull the board out, replace it with a new board, and you could actually mail order that, and the homeowner could put that in, that would be huge. But then you're going to be putting manufacturers out of business. But we would be then addressing sustainability in this world.
But I think think that that's the part that's always, every time someone says to me, you're going to put somebody out of business, I go, your business didn't belong here. Right? Every single time you say to me, you're going to lose a job, great, your job doesn't belong here. For the sake of keeping a job by holding us back in ideas, this seems like that's that resistance piece that people, that are why we don't evolve. Why life isn't getting easier quicker is because we're all worried that there's this big underlying worry that, oh my God, if robots take over construction, what will I do? Well, maybe you'll do the job the job you actually like doing, because the job you're doing wasn't very efficient. You weren't really great at it. We found a much more efficient model to make that work. And now we can go do, at one point we answered phones like this. There was a switchboard operator who plugged cords into a switchboard and made that work. And then we had bell phones where we had a little rotary dial. Today, I think my mother's maybe a handful of people that still have a house phone. And I think she's just stubborn. She's not going to let go of that number. And everybody has cell phones. And all those bell people, all those operators found careers that worked. It may be that I evolve on my rides to work. Right, in the future when I take my robo-taxi from Tesla, and on my way in, they teach me how to operate the latest and greatest piece of equipment that they've invented for my job site. I'll learn on my way to or from the office or from the job site. Maybe I get a briefing on today's job site, what I'll be doing, who I'll be working with, maybe a little background history of them so we can socialize a little bit better. But that evolution, holding it back because of our fear of losing jobs, just seems so primitive.
Probably what drives humanity, though, right? The fear of survival. When I was going through my 40s, where you go from your midlife crisis, where you buy fast cars, Mustangs and Porsches and that sort of stuff. One coach that I was working with said, until you are willing to live under a bridge, you are going to be at the effect of your ego. So it's not saying you will live under the bridge. The key word is here, the willingness. So what do you have to lose once you're living under the bridge? Nothing, right? So we are so caught up, our humanity, our human condition is so caught up in fear. We live in fear of losing. So I think as technology gains, we have to, I don't think we're going to have a community or a country of everyone earning $200,000 doing high-tech jobs because we've got robots in construction. I think that construction workers, there should no longer be a career in construction. I think a vocational tradesman should be a stepping stone to advancing their careers, because you're developing skills. And if you're from the age of 18 to 32, if you're working on a construction site as an electrician, plumber, framer, concrete worker, whatever, you're all learning how to work with your hands. But in this day and age where we're living to possibly 100, maybe even 120, for the person who's 18 years old right now, you're going to go through 5, 6, maybe even 8 career changes. Well, it probably would be great for you if you had the coordination to be able to work with your hands, let alone your brain. It's just gonna feed. It will make you be able to better survive in this world. Who knows what you need to survive with? But I also think there's a mentality there and a psychology that we have to let go of. What does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to be achieving, and what does wealth and what does abundance mean that I want to surround myself with? There's certainly driven people, entrepreneurs that are driven to create things and make meaning in this world, and they'll be rewarded for that. But there's a lot of this world that is also doesn't want to be bothered with that. They just want to, they have smaller ambitions, right? So
I've often said that the world is on this pen, right? If you're looking at this pen that I'm holding up, the entire world is on this pen. But nowhere on the pen is wrong, right? People get caught up in that, I want to be on a certain spot in the pen. Now look, on the front of the pen, where the tip is, that's where the very creative are. That's where the artist, the entrepreneur, the very creative folks are. There, and as you move back from the pen, there's people who like to be around those folks who like to help implement very creative ideas. Love to be around that energy, but they're not that creative a good person. And then as you move further back, there's people who run systems for the pet. And without that, the tip wouldn't hold on to the pet. And as you move further back, you've got people that do more static positions. As you get to the back of the pen, you have things like security guards and stable positions. Without them, the pen wouldn't work, right? And the problem is that when I think that I'm the security guard in the back, I'm like, oh my God, that guy in the tip, that I want to be like them. And I go out there and I try that, and you try to do that, act that way, and all of a sudden you start realizing, oh my God, this is insane. This is not my style of living. I never know where my keys are. I never know. I wake up in the morning, I have road rash. This is not the kind of life I want to live. And then the guy on the tip goes, maybe I want to be more like the person in the back. I want to be the person in the back of the pen where I get to have more stability. And they go back there and they fall asleep in life. You start to find your natural essence, and what that is, each one of us is different. And I think that's part of the discovery of the human is as I go on my journey, and maybe I change different spots on that pen throughout my life. There are times where I certainly feel, my creativity, and I embrace that. I think I was told a bad bill of goods as a kid, and it said somewhere I would work really, really hard, and then I'd get to a spot where I would do nothing. Like retirement involved doing nothing. Like somehow I'd be put out to pasture. I would just graze until I died. And I've certainly watched men do that. Great entrepreneurs, great leaders of industry, great creative people, and they've just lost their soul. My dad was one of those guys. My dad was one of those guys who, he loved being. He was an inventor, right? He worked for Pratt & Whitney. He made hundreds of lots and lots of different patents, and he was very creative. And then when they forced him into retirement, you could almost see the light turn off inside of him. And I don't know that that bill of goods, which says I'm going to go out to pasture after being this great thoroughbred, will be necessarily the bill of goods that was a proper one to sell to us. So as we evolve and we continue to get enlightened, you and I were talking a little bit about the entrepreneur. I get a hard time from people when people ask me, what's your company goal? Well, our first one is to break this $100 million mark. People are like, you can't have a financial goal that's not going to be, that's not tangible. People can't get emotion around that. I go, malarkey. I go, you can't, you need some way of measuring the success of the business. That doesn't mean the success of the people that run that, who you have to become to run the company, the systems you have to put to operate it, the people that we interact with. That's the true success. For me, as an entrepreneur, it wasn't about going out there and just making it. Maybe at first it was about the money, right? And then I got to making money, and I'm like, all right, so I made a lot of money. Maybe it becomes empty, meaningless. You start realizing, yeah, it's kind of empty, meaningless. Somewhere I want to advance and become. I start realizing, look at all these people that work really hard to create this. Maybe my life could be about them and what I could do to move, touch, inspire the people that work with me, right? How do I turn on? How can I be a light that turns on their light? My wife is Greek, and we go to Greek Easter in the church, in their Greek church, and it's awesome, right? The priest walks in, the church is dark, and he brings a candle with him, and he starts at the front of the church, and he lights the first row, and then they light the second row, and then they light the third row, and as you sit there, you watch the church light up. And I often wonder where we as a community forget to do that. How do we light each other's light rather than blow them out, right? I think there's been a certain part of our past where people, instead of burning bright with others, would rather blow out someone's candle so they're dark with them. And I wonder where that battle comes from, and how you start to realize I don't know if we need to do that. So
that was a lot of information there, and I agree with everything that you say. But I would like to just kind of add my 2 cents in there too. It's like part of life is also being an individual. It's to individuate. You need to find your own path, and part of that actually is to sit in darkness for a while. I actually have this saying that failure trumps success, because it's through failure that we learn. But we can't learn if we don't see our condition. And part of it's marketing and part of the messaging that's around us. You're deemed a nobody if you fail. Well, how short-lived is failure? Failure, I mean, you measure in time. People have this false sense of time, false sense of deadlines. I say that as an entrepreneur, I learn the most when we fail. And that success is a byproduct of a combination of ideas, just rolling up your sleeves and hard work and getting in there, but also stumble and falling and picking yourself and being able to pick yourself up. Because probably, I mean, I don't know you for your history, life history and your career, but I'm sure if you look back, there's probably a number of times when you could say that you failed, and it might have been an incremental failure, but it definitely prepared you for the next step of your life and the next step of whatever you were doing as an entrepreneur. Right. So invite the failure.
You're sitting there in pain. I don't know how much of that I want to invite, but for sure I've learned more from the things that have gone wrong rather than the things that have gone right. You're right.
Yes.
There's a motivating factor to that pain.
So you talk about lighting somebody's candle, right? I don't know if I would be lighting somebody's candle. I'd be showing them where the match was and where to possibly strike that match. But they're on their own to light their own candle, because if I light the candle for them, they're probably going to walk out the front door and forget that the wind actually will blow out the candle again. And then they're going to be helpless, right? So as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, I give guidance, but I don't. The worst, you talk about retirement and putting out the pasture, the worst thing you can do for your employees or the people, let's say the people in your team, you have employees, you have sub-consultants, you have other people, contractors. The worst thing you can do is show them every step of the way, because the life and business is so dynamic that every week there's going to be incremental changes. I mean, the life of a startup, it's so funny. It really changes from week to week, right? Like it's like, why bother writing a business plan?
Hour to hour sometimes. I mean, like literally, I watch, AM, PM changes that happen in groups, as we develop, a new project, a new customer, a new model, we've had customers walk in and go, we're going to take up, we're going to change your entire plan. Or one that started with a little bit of a flash, all of a sudden turned into a massive fire, something that turned out to be really awesome. Places where we had, we started to unravel it, and all of a sudden the whole sweater came. Like, oh, it was just a little string at first. Then all of a sudden you're like, wow, look at this. Whoa, right? All of a sudden we're doing hundreds of projects for a group. And, then you start learning how to get way more efficient. And a lot of that happens, you couldn't plan for it. You couldn't, you just got to be ready, stay conscious enough that in the moment to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, right? So that as it unfolds, you're able to sit there and go, let's go, right? All right, great. Let's try that. Don't run from it, embrace it. So
you bring up very good points. Being conscious, being aware, being in the moment and embracing it, no matter what's coming up, and not expecting for the answer to come right now in the very next minute, allowing some time to gestate on whatever the occurrence is. And for instance, like our business, Simple 5D, right now has gone through, in the last 4 months, it's gone through a period of commoditization, right? And you'll know this, it's like globalism. There's a lot of intelligent people in India who are getting into three-dimensional technologies and who are into getting educated and fairly sophisticated. And there's an unlimited amount of resources in India. So with today's world, they can work after 5 o'clock when your pencil drops, they can work all night. And they're getting really good at this. And they're starting to learn how to market themselves to firms within North America for what it is they do. So we could react and point the finger and say, boo-hoo, globalism, and the government should protect us. Or we go, well, what's the niche we can create out of what we're doing? So, well, I guess we're going to have to vertically integrate some more so we can bring not just some tangible components to what it is we do. So it's constantly changing, constantly dynamic, but you have to be conscious, you have to be aware, and you have to get out of your own way to allow things to evolve and and solutions to come. you have to invite the chaos, but you have to be navigating along the borders of order, right? And so that's when you see that, then the word retirement doesn't even come up for me. In fact, look, coronavirus was an interesting time because when we all got hit with this, even you probably, I mean, I don't even have to ask you questions about that, but I'm sure March 15th of 2020, you probably looked at everybody in the room and what's happening now? We don't know. We don't know what's happening. We're going to have to just go on quiet. We're going to have to go on pause for a month, right? And if that's what retirement's like, I don't want it.
After, at first, I got caught up in the fear, right? I will tell you, fear is like cocaine. I mean, people were like, oh, let's go watch a little Fox News. They're like all sitting over there taking hits of Fox News. Let's go get some CNN. Oh, BBC, oh my God, it's fine. And they were all just getting out here. And my wife would laugh at me. She'd go, you just took a hit of CNN. I'd come, I'd go over to the house and I'd watch TV for a little bit. And literally, I could just feel my whole system get into that, right? And it's literally a check me out. And then finally I realized, stop, do what you do. Get back in your office and do what you do. Get your people's mind right. Help keep your people out of the drama triangle. Get out of that triangle and start working on block, tackle, block, tackle, block, tackle. Get people present to where they are. Get out of the moment. A lot of companies crawled up like in a fetal position and sat on the ground and go, oh my God. I'm like, no, stop that. We want to be here afterwards. And how we're going to be here is we're going to do everything we can do all day long to keep moving our model forward. And the truth was, it got me out of all that fear. It made me responsible and gave me control of what was happening to my life rather than being controlled by the fear that was overwhelming me. And, it crept in every once in a while, for sure, right? Oh my God, what's this going to mean? I won't be able to live the way it was. But what I knew was it wasn't going to be as bad as I was making it out to be. At first I was like, well, if this is only 6 weeks, no big deal. And I thought if it's 6 months, it's going to be tougher. If it's going to be a year, there's no way we're all going to die. The whole country's going to fall apart. I went and bought a gun. That first month I bought a gun. I never had a gun. And in my entire life, I've never used a gun. And all of a sudden fear gripped me. And I'm like, I went out and bought a gun. Like, now they're kind of fun to have. I was some target practice and learned how to do that. It's kind of been fun practicing with one. But once I got out of that fear, got back into doing what we do, it just changed it. Now we're for the better. Now we've come out of Corona. The customers we had slowed down. It gave us the ability to go horizontally to more customers, right? We've picked up a whole bunch more customers. And we built relationships we wouldn't have had the time before Corona. We were so busy, we didn't have time to stop and go enjoy those relationships and build more relationships. But now we've got a team. Yeah, our margins were tough. Yeah, it took us financially, but we invested in the team of people that we have. The good have stuck around. A lot of people are still waffling from that whole Corona time. There's still quite a bit of funk in the air, we feel out there, but now we're starting to see the first and second rungs of climbing out of the hole. It's more of a tunnel than a hole.
It's going to be interesting to talk to you in a year from now. The construction industry, the economy in itself is probably going to explode. I think that the look coming out of your eyes is going to be even a lot more different in a year from now. But one thing I know from just talking with you is that you're comfortable in the unknown, and that you will be able to navigate through that. I'm not sure if the word control is the right thing, but you'll have the ability to process the information and come up with the solutions.
The part you talked about before, where the population is going to live longer. And just that, from the time I was born, average male life expectancy was 65, 67 years old. I think when we were 63, that evolved. My kids' will be 115. Just that alone right there will double the population on this planet. Right?
That's crazy.
And just that alone would continue to give opportunities for the construction and development world, to find products, more efficient properties. That evolution is going to change like cars did to horses, Uber did to taxis. They evolve. Where it's going to end up, I don't think we can see it standing where we're standing, but you certainly know that it's going to happen faster. And in order to just to support it, just in the next 30 years, where our population will double.
Actually, do you believe that the population will double?
Oh, for sure, will double. I mean, if you just think about it,
the American birth rate is dropped below 1.7. They're actually saying now with the wealth that's being created. I mean, there's almost no more poverty in this world, right? People are still able to, like, you go to India, so you're of a similar age as I do. Remember in the 80s when they had those horror stories of India and all the poverty in the streets and people not being able to feed themselves? India is now a net exporter of food.
Well, I still think there's quite a bit of, I'm next week I'm going to Africa. And
right.
A big part of what I'm doing there in India and Africa, the charities that we run over in those countries, my wife and I, they're still, look, they're emerging markets. They're exporting, but they're still, those are the opportunity lands. As those people in those countries get Lexus payments, right? And they know what it's like to have a house payment, a Lexus payment, and to get made. I mean, most of the world still doesn't have refrigerators. You go to India, most of them still do not have refrigerators, right? They're still daily shopping.
That's true. But you go to Germany and people still do lots of daily shopping. They actually, that's part of their community. That's part of their mindset. It's part of the freshness. Like, look at us in North America. We have all these chemicals in our food to keep the food from rotting, right? So, but we also get caught up in these huge ideals of where we want to go. Whereas the average European is their focus is around relationships, around the food, around the traditions. It's traditions that have actually helped guide us in our evolution. So it's funny, like not having refrigerators, I'm not so sure if that's a bad thing. It keeps I
know. That's the part that's going to be fun to watch, is that as that pendulum swings, our pendulum swung way the other way. Now you go to my house, we have a double door, super sized refrigerator with an iPad in the front, and from my phone I can tell you right now what's in my. I can look up and I can show you a picture of what's inside of my refrigerator from our meeting here. I mean, right. I don't know. We've swung the pendulum. At any given time, I need to know what's in my refrigerator. Oh my God! Oh look, I got an extra set of eggs. That's what we're talking about before with technology. Those silos they're working on. A lot of those will level out and make it a lot of fun. So, look, we've covered a lot of ground, and Steffen, you and I have interesting conversations every time we talk. I want to continue to have you on the show. I'm grateful today. I really am grateful for the conversation that we had today. And if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best place for them to reach out and get you?
I'm sure it's just easiest as email. That's Steffen, which is spelled not Steven, but it's STEFFEN at simple5d.com. And that would be my personal email. That's really the best way to get a hold of us or to get a hold of me. It was a real pleasure talking to you, Anthony. I just wanted to say that just the population of the world, because doubling the population of the world, that's actually a bit of a scary thing. There's actually now theory out there that we are going to not even reach 10 billion people. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday on there that was Jordan Peterson, and he had invited Dr. Marion Tuppy, who has a lot of empirical evidence on that we are going to hit, probably not exceed 10 billion and then scale back to 8 billion people because of the birth rates. Fertility rates are going down because wealth is contributing. There's a lack of need for having 6 kids, right? I mean, it's people are not replacing themselves these days. Sorry, that was a little tangent I went on, but
No. Listen, got it. We can do a whole nother one. I love Jordan. He was a part of my morning meditation this morning. Great thinker. Steffen, I'm grateful for the time, and we will have you on the podcast again here in a very short future, and I'm excited. So thanks again for the time. And we'll catch up with you here soon.
It was a real pleasure, Anthony, and thank you very much to you and your team for having me on your podcast. I enjoyed it very much. I always enjoy talking to you, so I wish you a good part of your day.
Cool, sir. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. My name is Anthony Amunategui, always looking for people to bring insight into the industry, finding ways to inspire people to have amazing careers in the development world. If you liked our podcast, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. If you really liked our podcast, make sure you hit the little bell. Thanks again for listening. Please share it with your friends.